Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a late night breaking news extra, breaking news piece on the Ukraine war with regard to the back and forth between, my goodness, Europe and Zelensky and Trump and Putin and Europe and Zelensky and Trump and Putin and Trump, so on and so forth. What is the latest? Well, if you remember, the Europeans, I use that as a collective noun for Ukraine and the four European leaders who were somewhat representative actually of Europe as a whole, as in they were speaking on behalf of a number of other nations, I believe. Nonetheless, they said, right, we want a 30-day ceasefire. If not, there are going to be huge sanctions. And by the way, we've got backing from the US, and there were phone calls with Trump. Then Putin called that emergency press conference, that statement where he said, you're not going to have a ceasefire, but we will say that we are going to start in-person negotiations with Zelensky on the 15th of May. So instead of starting a ceasefire on the Monday, that would be the 12th of May, so tomorrow, 13th, 14th, 15th, that would be Thursday, in which I think there's already a meeting 14th to the 16th to do with NATO and whatnot going on. But anyway, there will be a meeting between Zelensky and, one would presume, Putin on the 15th of May. So the Europeans said any negotiations are contingent upon a ceasefire, and you can't have negotiations without a ceasefire. And Putin very cleverly said, no, we're going to go straight to the negotiations. But that allows Russia to prolong a negotiation process whereby there's still war going on. There's no ceasefire. And you can say, well, negotiations might take months and 6 months. And in that time, Russia will still be pushing on the front line, still be doing all of their warlike activities, which is not ideal. So therefore, that is not agreeing to the ceasefire. And therefore, all of those people who put forward the ceasefire arrangement or demand should therefore come true on their threat of massive increase to sanctions on Russia. And that would include Trump, one would have thought. And then Trump came out early the next morning to say, okay, that sounds really good, and was very sort of positive with regards to what Putin had said. And it was all looking pretty worrying because actually he'd been sucked in by the Kremlin narrative, and that bit of quite clever positioning from Putin seems to have paid, or seems like it had paid dividends at that point. But it's still waiting for some clarification from Trump. Okay, then in the meantime, people like Lithuanian Foreign Minister here said, if the Russian army does not stop military operations by Monday, a new package of sanctions should be introduced immediately. This approach works. So when I say speaking on behalf of other Europeans, there is one speaking there. Then the Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky, strong supporter of Ukraine, said it's simple. Ukraine and the democratic world want a ceasefire. Putin wants to keep shouting, or keep shooting, keep shooting. And again, that is another position from, or the same position from another European nation in support of the European approach. But then Trump came out and said this. And if you were do I try not to be anti-Trump? Probably not enough. I am anti-Trump, but he gives us so much damned ammunition. My goodness. It's really hard to like Donald Trump when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to pretty much anything at the moment. But it's so difficult to try and be supportive of Trump when his position is so unbelievably terrible. So he comes out and says this, and it is just nuts. Indeed, as Noel Report says, Trump in full caps mode again says Putin doesn't want a ceasefire but wants to meet in Turkey and demands Ukraine agree, quote, immediately, all caps, and adds a bizarre World War II flex. Delusion meets diplomacy. I mean, this is bad. So Trump then comes out and basically appears to be fully aligned with Russia. President Putin of Russia doesn't want to have a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, which you might think sounds like he's having a go at Russia. But actually he ends up not doing that. And there's also weird capitalization. I don't know why he does this. Anyway, but rather wants to meet on Thursday in Turkey to negotiate a possible end to the all caps bloodbath. So he's saying, yeah, on the one hand, Putin doesn't want to have a ceasefire, but he does want to meet on Thursday to stop this war, right? Which is exactly what we said Putin was trying to communicate, which was like, yeah, I'm not going to have a ceasefire, I'm going to go here. And then that keeps the war going, but Trump doesn't understand that. So then Trump says, at least they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible. How long will that take? What, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 weeks? I don't know. But an immediate ceasefire would stop the bloodbath. Like, for Trump to be so concerned about the bloodbath, it's weird that he's not too concerned that Russia is not wanting to adhere to a ceasefire. It's just bonkers. Anyway, Ukraine should agree to this, all caps, immediately. I mean, this is an order for Ukraine to agree with Putin's demands and not for Putin to agree with Europe and the US's demands. Absolute insanity. At least, he continues, they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible, and if it is not, European leaders and the US will know where everything stands and can proceed accordingly. I'm starting to doubt that. Who's he going to doubt? That Putin's up for peace? I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin. Not that Putin will make a deal with Ukraine. Not that Putin has to do anything. Putin gets a free rein to do what the frick he wants and bomb the shit out of Ukrainian civilians. That's all right, but Ukraine should make the deal. Trump here is morally repugnant. I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin, who's too busy celebrating the victory of World War II. Then we get this weird... It's just all over the place. So we've just had a go at Ukraine implicitly. Oh, I doubt that Ukraine are going to be, wanting to do a deal with... I doubt they're going to do a deal with Putin. Cut Ukraine just... But Putin is too... He's like slagging everyone off. But Putin, who's too busy celebrating the victory of World War II, which could not have been won, not even close, without the United States of America. You get, as Noel Report says, this weird World War II flex at the end, which is like, yeah, you're celebrating Victory Day. You would have been nowhere without the US. We are so amazing. We're at the centre of everything. And by extension, that's me. And I am US. And even though, I wasn't born then, or whatever, I'd have to do the maths. But, it was all me type thing. Have the meeting now, all caps at the end, which is insane, right? I can't believe he appears to have sided with Russia effectively. That's what I'm getting from this. I wonder if you think the same. Ron Filipkowski says, apparently Trump's fourth threat in 3 months to impose additional sanctions on Russia if they don't agree to a ceasefire is now off because Putin doesn't want to do that. 4 threats, 4 Putin rejections, 4 Trump does nothing. Those are the statistics you need to take on board. Trump is weak. Trump will not do anything against Russia. Trump imposes impotent threats. Like I keep saying, like a parent or a teacher, if you threaten a child with consequences if they do something and don't follow through with those consequences, you will be found out by those children, by your own children. You will be recognized as having threats that never come true, that you never followed through on, and you get taken advantage of. That is Trump here. This is absolute weakness. Garry Kasparov, former Russian chess grandmaster, says, everyone already knows Trump rushes to abandon his own and Europe's ceasefire deadline which Ukraine already agreed to embrace Putin's latest bullshit and pressure Ukraine into worthless negotiations. The brief posturing was a sham then, and Trump is still on Russia's side. Proved otherwise. I mean, Trump appears to be fully aligned with Russia time and time again. Now, the question then is, well, what would be Zelensky's response? And Zelensky was genius. So, hats off to Zelensky. He is playing a really difficult bloody game of chess here, and he keeps coming up with some pretty good moves. So he's then seen Trump go off on one kind of at him and then align with Russia, so he calls the bluff. Starting tomorrow, Ukraine is ready for a full, unconditional and lasting ceasefire to lay the groundwork for peace talks. So ceasefire still on. Let's go for that. And if Russia don't follow through with this ceasefire, then they should be hammered with sanctions, right? And then he says, there's no point in prolonging the killings. I'll be in Turkey this Thursday and expect Putin to come. Personally, no excuses. So Trump has said, have the meeting now. Zelensky says, I will. Thank you very much. I'll be in Turkey on Thursday. I'll see you there, Putin. But by the way, if you don't have that ceasefire starting not on Thursday, but tomorrow, Monday, then you should have, as we've all agreed, sanctions hit you hard. This is pretty much, I think, although I say Zelensky's played a bit of a blinder there, it's pretty much the only move he could have made, I guess. Pekka Kaliniemi, I love this analogy here. Zelensky constantly pulling those Uno reverse cards is a pretty good strategy against Putin. So yeah, and to say again, these are Zelensky's words. We await a full and lasting ceasefire starting from tomorrow to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy. There is no point in prolonging the killings, and I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey on Thursday. Personally, I hope that this time the Russians will not look for excuses. Ouch. That is, well, I think maybe the only thing he could do, but actually he could have done many things, but this is the only option to have made something positive out of the US being really bloody difficult for Ukraine, and the US trying to give Russia as much elbow room as they possibly can. Shashank Joshi from The Economist, who, I've got a lot of time from Shashank Joshi. He calls it like it is, and he's a really fair analyst as a defence correspondent for a magazine that's not exactly known for its liberal tendencies in terms of, classical liberalism in terms of economics maybe, but in terms of ideally there'd be, I think, supporting Republicans in times past. But here, Shashank Joshi is saying Trump played like a violin as usual, drops the ceasefire demand painstakingly agreed with allies, puts pressure back onto Ukraine. It's woeful. Quote, Donald Trump has demanded that Ukraine should immediately sign to direct talks with Russia in a bid to end the war, is what he's saying from Sky News. But he's right. This is woeful, and he is being played time and time again. But Zelensky challenges Putin to meet in person for peace talks. And I think there's a few nuggets in here that's sort of coming out from the reporting. Zelensky's challenged Putin to meet in person peace talks in Istanbul on Thursday in a dramatic gambit after a weekend of diplomatic flurry. And I like the use of that chess term gambit here, which is all, I just think this is a very complex chess game. His comments came after Putin rejected a demand from Ukraine and European allies to sign a 30-day ceasefire, but said Russia was ready for direct negotiations with Ukraine. Putin said delegations from the two countries should meet on Thursday in Turkey. Although European leaders insisted there should be no negotiations until Putin agrees to ceasefire, Trump put pressure on Zelensky to agree immediately to negotiations this week in a post on Truth Social. Shortly afterwards, Zelensky went public with his surprise offer. The two leaders have not communicated directly since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and there have been no publicly known talks between Moscow and Kyiv since March 2022, shortly after the war began. Trump said in a statement on Truth Social platform that Ukraine should have the meeting now, all caps. He said, and we know what he said, the demand for the 30-day ceasefire was set out on Saturday during a visit to Kyiv by the leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Poland, who together with Zelensky made a phone call to Trump before holding a joint press conference. Britain's Keir Starmer said that if Putin rejected the offer, we will respond, working with President Trump, with all our partners. We will ramp up sanctions and increase our military aid for Ukraine's defense to pressure Russia back to the table. So it's really all about tomorrow. If Russia do not agree to a full-on ceasefire, and it's going to be interesting to see what Ukraine do. I presume they're all going to down sticks, really, and not fire, keep to a ceasefire starting Monday. And if Russia don't agree to that ceasefire, it'll be interesting to see how long that lasts from a Ukrainian point of view. Then they have all the ammunition they need to request that sanctions are ramped up on Russia. Putin's response to the ultimatum came in the unusual form of a statement read to journalists. He accused Ukraine of breaking previous ceasefires, but said that despite this, he was suggesting the two parties meet for talks, which said he could take place in Istanbul on Thursday. He did not say who would attend, though observers widely expected him to send his top diplomatic aides. We are ready for serious talks with the Ukraine, and we want to solve the root causes of the conflict. And of course, in saying that, he's admitting that actually the situation is intractable, like that it's unsolvable, that Russia have such maximalist demands when it comes to solving the root problems that Ukraine are never going to, and in fact, no nation would agree to that who are supportive of essentially Ukraine. None of the allies would agree to what Russia's demands would be in terms of sorting out the root causes. Trump's response suggests the tactic of Putin may have succeeded, delivering a significant blow to Western unity. However, his Truth Social post also hinted at the frustration he has reportedly expressed in private in recent days over Moscow's hardline demands in the war in Ukraine. So, and that's a point, is that Trump's response, his latest response, has been somewhat schizophrenic. And you're trying to work out exactly where his allegiances lie, because he's just slagging off both sides, it appears. I guess tomorrow is going to be the key day here. Of course it is. Now, Michael Weiss here said, although this is somewhat early, I think possibly before the latest Trump statement, says this is why what the Europeans did was clever. If Trump now falls for Putin's bait and switch, it means he is rejecting his own plan. Even if he's foolish enough to do that, the optics this time aren't in his favour. There is no televised Oval Office showdown to blame on Zelensky. Zelensky was fully on board with Trump's encouragement. More New York Post editorials and Fox News hits await. The president is weak and embarrassing, and the Russians are eating our lunch. While missiles and drones continue to rain down on Ukraine, Vladimir, stop indeed. Opposition will be not just in Kyiv, London and Brussels, it will also be here in the US. Furthermore, deals on F-16 spare parts, Patriots, indirect aid via Germany, artillery and Patriot missiles. Undoing all these things means undoing what Trump himself put in motion. Sad. Added to which, Europe's position is unchanged. No sanctions relief and no halt to security assistance. No matter what Washington says or does, Ukraine isn't going to negotiate the terms of surrender in Turkey, especially when the US assesses, Christ, even JD fucking Vance assesses, that Russia cannot take more territory by force. Trump privately tells donors Putin wants all of Ukraine. Quite. Istanbul is designed to demilitarize Ukraine, get regime change in Kyiv, get sanctions relief, and certify occupation and annexation. And this is as a starting point for litigating the root cause of the war, which is a post-Cold War European security architecture and the removal of US troops from NATO's eastern flank. Some Russian officials are transparent about this. We are in a strange period. Analysts in 2022 argued Putin and Russia are 10 feet tall and unstoppable, and therefore the US and Ukraine should not arm Kyiv and to do dismal deals instead. Ukraine saw the matter differently. Now we hear analysts, many of them critics of the aforementioned lot, arguing that Donald Trump and America are 10 feet tall and unstoppable, no matter what Ukraine and the EU and all of NATO -1 contrive. This about a man who can't even lick the Houthis and who confuses refugee asylum with insane asylums. defeatism as a policy stales quickly and generally ages poorly. And yet, this is, I'm so surprised at the US actually just being continually weak at the moment, just really weak. And when I say US, of course, I mean the Trump administration. It is unbecoming of the nation. And I guess we'll have to see what then Trump's response is to Zelensky's rather bullish move there. Anyway, let me know what you think. Crazy times. I keep having to do videos because it is kind of, I guess, political, geopolitical, military, geopolitical tennis going on here, with the ball going from one side of the net to the other in quick succession. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.